This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. LBC's Election Call.
Hello and welcome to Ian Dale Drive. You can watch us on the website at lbc.uk in glorious HD. Now, every day during the campaign, we'll be giving you the chance to question a senior politician about what matters most to you. Across the week, we've been hearing from all the main parties as Britain decides. And for the next 30 minutes, it's the turn of the Labour Party leader and leader of the opposition, Ed Miliband. He's here to take your calls, 0345 6060 973. And as I say, you can go to lbc.co.uk and you can watch us as well. Ed Miliband, welcome to our new studios.
Good to be with you, and they're very impressive studios they are too. Should we tell people what we were comparing them to?
If you wish to.
It was Doctor Who, because on Doctor Who, Davros used to sit behind a sort of a control panel, a bit like, I'm not comparing you to Davros, but...
well, I've been called worse, as you
probably me too,
know.
actually.
Well, you have. Interesting in this election campaign, in that a lot of people are saying Ed Miliband's come into his own. Do you feel that as the campaign's developed?
I sort of feel I'm the same person I was a few months ago, so I'll sort of let other people make the judgment. The thing I've liked about it is going out, making the case, people seeing the real me, not perhaps a caricature. Obviously, the TV debates were one opportunity. This is another opportunity just to sort of set out my stall about what kind of country I want to build.
A lot of people are saying the campaign's been too stage managed, that you're not actually meeting real people. When you make speeches, it's party members there rather than ordinary members of the public. You're not doing enough walkabouts, for example.
So sometimes it's party members. Often, most of the time, we try and get people who are members of the public who aren't necessarily committed. I do something I call a people's question time, which I want to do if I become Prime Minister in the Palace of Westminster. Inviting undecided voters and others, and sometimes, you get hostile questions. I want to sort of encourage hostile questions at those kind of events. So, look, I think
it's a dangerous thing to say as you're about
I
to
know. There'll be lots of hostile questions
right,
here.
If you'd put your headphones on.
Yeah, sure. There'll be a hostile question.
Well, I don't know. Let's see if it is. It's from Abby, who's at the Oval. Hello, Abby.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Very well, thank you. What would you like to ask Ed?
Hi, Abby.
Hi, Ed. Hello. So I completely share your political values, but I just cannot imagine you as the next Prime Minister. So can you therefore tell me how you personally qualify as the next leader of this nation?
Abby, I think it's about what you're looking for in a Prime Minister. Let me tell you what I think matters. I think it's about having ideas to change the country. My fundamental view is that the problem about Britain is that it works for the richest and most powerful, but doesn't work for most working people. I think you've got to have the strength to stand up for those values, even when there are powerful opponents. That's what I've done in this Parliament on, say, the energy companies, where I'm going to freeze bills till 2017, on the banks, on taking on tax avoidance, and that's what I do as Prime Minister. And then it's about it's about decency. Something like the bedroom tax, I think, offends my basic sense of decency, and I would be a Prime Minister who's always thinking about how do you properly stand up for everyday people in our country?
Why do you think it is that someone like Abby, who clearly shares your values, she's probably an instinctive Labour voter, she doesn't want to vote for you?
Look, different people have different tastes. As I said earlier, what I've liked about this campaign is being able to set out what I stand for. And, people will have to make their judgments about me, and we'll know soon enough in a couple of weeks' time.
Abby?
Good answer, Ed. I'm very pleased.
Oh, thank you very much.
Has it convinced you? That easy?
I'm going to think about it.
Oh, go on, Abby. Go on.
Well, she's teetering on the brink. Maybe
nearly there.
I'll tell you what. We'll ring Abby back the day before the election and see if she's jumped over the brink.
Maybe I need to go and ring Abby.
You might need to. And we'll give you a number. Anna is in Manchester, who texts in, just seen on Twitter that your brother David has sent off his postal vote with the hashtag #Ed4PM. Does that come as a relief? Will he be doing any campaigning in this country over the next few weeks, or is that it?
Well, I think voting for us is important, and look, he's been sending me very encouraging messages throughout this campaign, and I'm really grateful to him for that. He's got his own job in America, and he said, Ian, when he left British politics, that he didn't want the sort of soap opera, and I think that's...
So he's not going to be coming over in the last 2 weeks to campaign for you?
No, we've got no plans to do that. He's getting on with his job, helping refugees.
Well, when a politician says no plans, we know what that sometimes can
No,
mean. But you're ruling it out.
Well, I am basically, yeah. He's...
Right, let's go to Tony in Newport. Hello, Tony.
Hello.
Hi, Tony.
Hi. How many refugees from North Africa should the UK be prepared to take?
Well, after your speech today, that's a very interesting question.
Well, Tony, I'm not going to pluck a figure out of the air, but let me tell you what my approach would be to this. There's two sort of distinct issues in my view. One is rescuing people from drowning, because we've seen terrible scenes in the Mediterranean, and I think it's right that we make sure that we restart that search and rescue. It was stopped in November, as you may know. And, you know, the people traffickers are doing the people trafficking, but we've got a responsibility to make sure we rescue people in need. And then we've got to work with the United Nations and the European Union to take our share of refugees. And you know, we're talking about small numbers. But as I say, I'm not going to pluck a figure out of the air, but I think it's right to do it. And let me just say this, Tony. There'll be some people listening who are worried about immigration. I think there's no trade-off between showing humanitarian help to refugees and controls on immigration. You know, I've changed Labour's position on immigration. We're saying you won't get benefits for the first 2 years if you come here and so on. So I think both of those are consistent.
Bearing in mind, immigration is actually one of the most important issues for voters in this campaign. It's consistently in the top three. Do you not think that you should be able to say, well, look, bearing in mind all of the different aspects of this crisis in the Mediterranean, Britain should be taking its fair share. We should be taking maybe 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever number, because voters have a right to know that figure, surely.
Well, no, but you've got to work with the EU and the other institutions to identify the right number and what Britain's fair share is, and that's the right way of approaching these things. I think at the moment the key issue is to rescue drowning people, and I think there'll be lots of people right across the country who will share that view.
In your speech today at Russie, you were very critical of David Cameron for his stance on Libya. Were you being entirely fair to him, though? Because I don't remember hearing any speeches from you about post-military intervention in Libya.
Well, actually, and when I supported the action in Libya, one of the points I made, one of the most important points I made, was we've got to learn the lessons of Iraq, and that is about post-conflict planning. I asked David Cameron about this in February, and look, the problem is, I said when I became Labour leader, we need to learn the lessons of the Iraq war. And what one of those lessons was about post-conflict planning. And, you know, I do sort of slightly think the Conservative Party is wanting to sort of whip up a big kind of a row about what I said on this. If you look at what I said in my actual speech, I think I was making the absolutely correct point that the British government hadn't properly engaged. And you know, they want to obscure the real issue here, which is we didn't do the post-conflict planning.
But you did say this at the time of the Libyan action. You said this is an important moment to recognise the National Transitional Council and their role in taking Libya forward, and we've got to be led by them. It's very important the Libyans determine their future. That's effectively saying leave Libya to the Libyans. I mean, well, what was the alternative? What would you have liked David Cameron to do? Boots on the ground?
No, but there's three things that haven't happened. There's a political track that should have been pursued much more vigorously. There's a so-called Friends of Libya group, which Britain is in charge of. There is a security track, which is making sure that money from oil revenues doesn't go into the wrong hands, that the arms embargo is properly monitored, and there's also a diplomatic track, which is engaging in countries in the region. The reality is, Ian, that the international community, and the British government included, has taken their eye off the ball on this.
But you're saying that now. You've mentioned Libya once in a press release since 2011, in 2013. How can people have confidence in you criticising the government now when you haven't been talking about this in the last 4 years?
Well, actually, I raised it as recently as February. I raised it in a European Council statement, and I asked David Cameron about the post-conflict planning, and he himself said it hasn't been good enough. Now, I just want to go to this bigger lesson, though, because I think this is where it goes to me as Prime Minister. I want Britain engaged in the world, and I'd be willing to commit our troops or Britain into military action if it is right for our national interest. But I will only do it knowing that we have a plan for the peace as well as a plan for military action. But that is such an important lesson for the country.
Do you understand that people worry about your lack of foreign policy experience and that you've been on very few trips abroad since you've become party leader? I think I'm right in saying you've only been to 8 different countries as party leader. You haven't been to anywhere in Asia. You've been to Washington, Israel and various European countries. People worry about that you're inexperienced and you won't be able to deal with people like Vladimir Putin.
Well, let me make the comparison. Look, I've got more experience than David Cameron had. I was climate change secretary. That meant going around the world to China, India, elsewhere, negotiating an international agreement. And look, people have to make a judgment both about experience and about judgment. You take the judgment I made in the summer of 2013. You talk about standing up to people. President Obama wanted David Cameron to agree to military action. It was me that said we should pause, and that we should say no.
But you actually agreed to it, first of all.
No, that's not correct.
Well, OK, well, look, let's move on because we need to go to some more calls. Bob is in Hanwell. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Ian.
Hi, what would you like to ask?
Hi, Bob, how are you?
Hello, Ed. I'd like to ask Ed. I run a business at the moment, Ed, which is currently booming, OK?
Which business? What does it do, Bob?
We're in commercial gas. So we train apprentices. We've been training apprentices for over 20 years, OK?
Congratulations, and thank you for the training of apprentices that you do, Bob.
Well, I can't say thank you to Labour for that, I'm afraid.
OK, never mind. I'll still say thank you to you.
Let's get back to it. Right. My question to you, my business is currently booming. Now, I, as a businessman, have looked at your manifesto. I've heard all the hot air. I've heard all the guff. How are you going to reassure me that if you get in, that this economy is going to continue so as my business continues to grow, so as I can train people? And I'm a person that came from a socialist family, you know. I know that you like to peddle the politics of envy, that the rich have got all this, that and the other. But from my point of view, I'm very worried about you, Ed, and I'll tell you for why.
Very quickly, Bob.
OK. 1, you were a journalist. 2, you're a political analyst. And 3, you've never run a business.
Well, to be fair, he wasn't a journalist, I don't think.
I was a journalist, actually.
OK.
Yes,
But I'm not sure that's a disqualification.
Well,
What's your main point, Bob? Just get to the main question.
I want Ed to reassure me, to tell me, yes, everything's going to be safe, and I want him to put it down and tell me point by point. I don't want this guff, oh, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. What specifically are you going to do to help small business?
Right.
Let me give you a very specific example, Bob. The government says their priority is to cut taxes for the largest businesses, cut corporation tax from 21 to 20%. My priority is something different, is to use resources to cut business rates for small businesses. Because I think lots and lots of small businesses are finding it incredibly hard, are finding, your business is booming, congratulations on that, but lots of small businesses find it hard and need that extra help. That's my priority for small businesses. But let me go to this wider issue about the economy.
Ed, can I stop you? My rates are £97 a year under the London Borough of Ealing. You're going to cut 97 quid a year. That's going to help me, isn't it?
What's your bigger priority, Bob?
Well, my bigger priority is to make my business work. My priority is for this country to make its way in the world. And the way it's going to make its way in the world is to have experienced leadership leading it with concise and priced plans, not hot air and guff. We're going to do this and we're going to do that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bob, the thing about our manifesto is every penny of what we promise is paid for. We're showing where the money's coming from. You don't get that with the other parties. You don't get that with the Conservatives. We're going to cut the deficit every year. It's a clear promise that we've made. I'm a Labour leader going into an election saying outside key areas there will be reductions in spending. So I want to reassure you on that point. But I do want to say this about the economy. There are some people doing well in this economy, Bob, but for lots of people, the recovery hasn't reached them. And I think that's what we've got to change in this country. And actually, Bob mentions apprenticeships, and it's great that Bob is offering apprenticeships. We need more businesses doing what Bob is doing, and we've got a plan to do that.
Right, let's move on to Rick, who is in Morden. Bob was talking about small businesses. Rick, you want to talk about a very big business?
Hello, Mr. Miliband.
Hi, Rick, how are you?
I'm not too bad. Are you happy that HSBC might be leaving the UK?
No, and I think that the HSBC intervention today is very interesting. I mean, they say the number one economic risk for the country is leaving the European Union.
Well, they say it's actually the regulatory environment and the tax environment more than that, to be fair to them.
The comments I read from them was...
Well, I've got them here from the BBC right. here, and I mean... They
must be true.
Well, they have a good response. They have reported that it's because of the regulatory environment, and they're basically paying half of the banker's levy, so £1 billion. Now, that's part of the reason why they're leaving, and you're right as well as it's about the EU. What can you do to reassure them?
Well, the thing I saw, we were doing a trade comments for HSBC, the thing I saw was that they said the number one economic risk for the country was leaving the European Union. And, I've set out a very clear course on this, Ian. Under my government, we want to and will stay members of the European Union. I think it's the right thing for the country. I've said that we're unlikely to have a referendum. Some of your listeners won't be pleased about that, because I think the bigger priority for the country is to get on with the business of sorting out the cost of living crisis.
Why won't you let the people decide? I mean, rather than do what David Cameron is saying, and let's have 2 years of uncertainty, which you understandably criticise him for, why not say, look, let's just lance this boil for once and all, let the people decide, we'll have a referendum before the end of this year and get it out the way?
2 reasons. One, I don't want to leave the European Union, but I have said that if there was a transfer of powers from Britain to the EU, there'd be an in-out referendum. Secondly, a question of priorities. I don't want to plunge this country into that kind of uncertainty. I want to sort out the biggest issues people are facing. You're building a future for young people, rescuing our NHS, building a recovery that goes beyond the City of London. All of those things are my priorities.
But the trouble is that your policies are going to make HSBC more likely to leave this country, because George Osborne has increased the bank levy, but you want to increase it even further.
Well, I don't believe that HSBC is going to leave the country because of a small increase in the bank levy.
They're paying £1 billion. That's not a small amount of money.
Yeah, but, look, I think we learned one thing from the financial crisis, that when banks say, we're worried about this regulation or we're worried about that kind of a tax change, we don't just say, well, if the banks say it must be correct. I think the warning about Europe is a warning shared by lots and lots of businesses, though.
Michelle in Romford says, how did you celebrate St George's Day yesterday?
By being out on the campaign trail throughout England, and it was...
UKIP are promising another bank holiday on St George's Day. You could get a lot of votes by matching that one.
I'm quite sympathetic to more bank holidays, but you have to be careful with what it means for the economy and all that.
So no celebration, it was a normal day for you?
Well, it was nice to celebrate it, as I say, by campaigning in England.
What does England mean to you?
England means a whole range of things. It means a sense of fair play. It means incredible countryside. It's obviously the place that where my parents took refuge after the Second World War, so it means a huge amount to me. OK, let's go to Johnny, who's in Dulwich. Hello, Johnny.
Hi,
Johnny.
Ed. Hi, Ian. Hi, Ed. My question is simple. It's what are you going to do about the Lord Greville situation?
Well, Johnny, it is a very serious situation. As you know, the Director of Public Prosecutions has made a decision not to prosecute. I think we have to...
Is that the right decision?
I think the one thing in this is that it's not for politicians to second-guess legal judgments that are made. That is the whole point about the separation of law and politics. But let me just say this to Johnny, because it is important. First of all, my heart goes out to the victims of these alleged crimes. And secondly, since the justice doesn't seem like it will be gained for the victims, I think it's incredibly important that they at least get to tell their stories. And that's why I think the overarching inquiry that the government has set up must take evidence from them, and we've got to learn the lessons as an institution, every institution in our society, because child abuse, child sexual exploitation is absolutely an appalling crime.
Theresa May has said she's concerned by this decision. Jeremy Hunt told me a couple of days ago, Norman Lamb as well, they thought that it needed to be looked at again. Could she not have said, look, bearing in mind the CPS record on Lord Janner, that he maybe should have been prosecuted a couple of times before, she should have recused herself and said, look, I'll send this to a judge to make that decision as to whether he's fit to appear in front of court. Wouldn't that have been a reasonable thing for her to do?
I think it is regrettable that no action is going to be taken if there was evidence, but Ian, I think as somebody who wants to be the Prime Minister of the country, I can't, you wouldn't expect me to start second-guessing these kind of judicial decisions.
You could admit that it was a decision that caused you some concern.
Well, I said I think it's regrettable that if there was evidence, he's not being prosecuted.
Okay. You can watch us at lbc.co.uk if you'd like to watch as well as listen. Let's go to Claire, who's in Manchester. Hello, Claire.
Hello.
Hi, what would you like to ask?
Hi, Claire.
Hello. My question is, my mother died in an NHS hospital under Labour's watch. How can Labour claim to be a party of the NHS?
Well, first of all, Claire, I'm incredibly sorry to hear about what happened to your mum. And when anything goes wrong in our NHS, I think it needs to be properly investigated and properly dealt with. I know that won't bring your mum back, but I'm incredibly sorry for what happened. I think the NHS is a fantastic institution. I think overall we made progress in our NHS, but obviously that can never excuse, any case that goes wrong.
Well, I think it was systemic. I don't think it was one or any case. I mean,
what do you think the systemic problem?
Denial, lack of transparency, and that's from my personal experience watching her die in agony. And that's irrespective of all the other scandals that have come out, like the staff's hospital.
Well, look, I'm incredible.
So, I actually find it physically repulsive when I actually get documentation coming through my front door about Labour being the party of the NHS. She suffered totally avoidable, terrible, agonising suffering.
Why do you blame a political party?
Just let me finish, please. Labour had been in for the best part of 13 years when she died. Totally inadequate weekend staffing, routine operations prioritised over emergency operations, a total denial of inadequacy, staff totally in fear and unable to whistleblow, totally poor coordination of resources. And since then, one conversation I heard on the radio where one of the Labour spokesmen said something about, we had record levels of patient satisfaction and family satisfaction during our time. Well, I only wish I could have been given one of these so-called surveys, because her death was horrific, and I have to live with that every day. And you've not answered my question.
Well, look, we've got a plan for the NHS, Claire, but that's not going to help you, and I know it's not going to satisfy you. I suppose one question I've got for you is, it sounds like appalling events happened. Was there a system in place to at least get some kind of ability for you to find out what happened, why it went wrong, lessons to be learned? Because I think if anything goes wrong in our NHS, it's obviously done in your case, your mum's case. I think the best thing I can say is there've got to be systems where we understand why it went wrong and what we can do to put it right and prevent it happening in the future.
One of the hardest things for me has been the total denial of Labour about what went wrong. I've spoken to my prospective Labour candidate, and he put the phone down on me because he obviously couldn't answer the question and just didn't know what to say.
Well, I won't put the phone down on you, Claire. What I suggest that after this programme, I'm very, very happy to speak to you in the next few days. I want to find out what happened in your mum's case.
Why was those circumstances allowed to happen? You pride yourself on being the party of the NHS through the ages. Why, during 13 years, did you let the NHS descend to such a level? Well,
look, I mean, overall, Claire, I know this doesn't help you or your mum's case. I think by common consent, the NHS improved, but that doesn't excuse anything. So, look, as I say, I'm very, very happy to hear from you directly about what went wrong. It can't bring your mum back, but it can at least mean that I, as a prospective Prime Minister, I hope to be Prime Minister, understand why it went wrong and what lessons should be learned.
Claire, thank you for your call. Stay on the line, and we'll put Ed Miliband in touch with you after the programme. Janet is in Louth in Lincolnshire. Janet, what's your question to Ed Miliband?
If you become Prime Minister in 2 weeks' time, will you give preferential treatment to Scotland compared to the rest of the UK?
No, Janet. And look, I'll be a Prime Minister who stands up for the whole of the United Kingdom, and that means every part of the United Kingdom. And I do make this point to you, Janet, because obviously this debate is live about Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland and so on. I think actually what unites us across the United Kingdom is greater than what divides us. I want to be a Prime Minister who stands up for working people across the country, whether that's raising the minimum wage or banning the exploitation of zero-hours contracts or building a future for young people, all of which is part of our plan. So I think we are stronger together as a United Kingdom, and I believe we can... Look, there'll be some people in this election who want to set England versus Scotland. I don't think that's good, because I think that is actually the path to break up for the country. I don't think we should be setting one country of the United Kingdom against another.
I mean, you've always accused the Tories of being the party of the English. Of course, your party might be the party of the English soon, because you might not have many MPs left after May the 7th in Scotland. Don't you feel partly responsible that the Labour Party in Scotland is crashing at the moment, and you might not have more than a handful of MPs left?
Well, look, I take responsibility for everything that happens in the Labour Party. We had a referendum last year that divided Scotland. 45 were for yes and 55 were for no.
So how do you account for the rise of the SNP since then?
Well, I think it's in part on the back of that referendum, which was a very divisive moment for Scotland. I think it's important to say that this general election is not the referendum. Either you have a Labour government or a Conservative government. And, I'm going to be battling out in the next 2 weeks to see who's better for social justice. My priority is a mansion tax on homes above £2 million for the NHS, and that can help the NHS across the United Kingdom. A bank bonus tax to put young people back to work. Getting rid of the bedroom tax.
That's not cutting through in Scotland.
Well, let's see what happens on May the 7th. Still, people are making up their minds.
I've got a really good question here from Marie in Perth. She says, "Is it time to weaponise Gordon Brown?
I think Gordon's been out there, actually. I think he was out there yesterday.
Only in Kirkcaldy. What about, I mean, why can't he do for the Labour Party now what he did for the Better Together campaign?
Well, I'm sure he's going to be out there because he's going around the country. I spoke to him a few days ago. He's going around the country making speeches, and I know he's going to do that.
So he's going to do it a lot between now and
he's going to keep doing it. He's actually already been doing it.
You've ruled out a coalition with the SNP. We know that. You've ruled out any kind of agreement with UKIP. What about the DUP in Northern Ireland? Because they will have 8, 9, 10 MPs.
You're very tempting, Mr. Dale, but
well,
I don't think...
I mean, if you've ruled it out for them, why can't you rule it out for the DUP?
I think, you know, I take a sort of slightly old-fashioned view on this. Let's fight the issues out in the next 2 weeks or so, and then let the people decide.
You can see the inconsistency, can't you? If you rule it out with two parties, why can't you?
I don't think the DUP is going to go into coalition with anybody. I'm sure that's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the remarks of their health minister.
I haven't.
Overnight. Some fairly disgusting remarks about the gay community. And a lot of people in Northern Ireland just wonder whether, if they have people who are capable of making remarks like that, whether they ought to be eligible for any kind of agreement with you after the election. That's why I asked the question.
Well, I haven't seen those remarks. Okay. I'll catch up with those remarks.
Let's go to Charlie, who is in Gillingham. Hello, Charlie.
Hello there, Ian.
Hi, Charlie.
Hello there.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. Yep, great. Can you tell me, what would be the biggest cut that you would make in your first budget as Prime Minister if you was to be elected?
When you say the biggest cut, what do you mean, Charlie?
Well, I think...
Spending? Do you mean spending?
Saving the most money.
Spending.
I think most people realise that there are going to be some...
Well, let me tell you our approach on this, Charlie. So we've said that we're going to protect key departments like health and education, but outside those areas, spending will fall. We've identified some of the savings we can make. So we've shown, for example, through efficiencies in the police budget, how you can save £800 million, in the local government budget, £500 million. But the detailed plans that we'll set out, so I've given you a clear sense of where we need to make some savings. But the detailed plans we'll have to set out in government. The reason for that is...
He's asking an interesting question, though, because we have heard some of the cuts that you are going to make. Ed Balls has told me very often about the cut in the winter fuel allowance, but that's a sort of relatively small amount of money. Charlie, like a lot of people, wants to know, well, if you're going to balance the budget by the end of the Parliament, there's going to have to be some big cuts. Can't you tell us one of them?
Well, I've actually set out some just now, and you mentioned the winter fuel allowance too, but look, the right way to do this is in government, because that's when you know where the efficiencies can be saved and where the savings can be made, and the government hasn't done a spending review itself. But look, the key thing with us is it's part of a balanced plan. So fair taxes is part of our plan. So we're going to reverse the tax cut that David Cameron gave to the richest in our society. And the third part of our plan, this is a crucial part of getting the deficit down, is raising living standards. Because if you don't get higher living standards, you don't get the tax revenues in. So, look, I've set out a very clear direction of travel. I've set out a clear sense of what the plan looks like. All of the details obviously have to be done in government when you've got the books in front of you.
We're going to finish with probably the most difficult question you're going to get today. What do you make of Millifandom?
What do you make of it, Ian?
I think it's an interesting phenomenon. I saw the pictures.
Interesting, that is a euphemism, is it?
I saw you being mobbed by this hen party. You didn't seem very willing to get off the bus, but you didn't tempt them on the bus either.
No. Look, I think you're as surprised by Millifandom as I am. I think it is. It is fair to say.
Let me tell you, a Tory friend of mine said, "You know, the Tory campaign's tanking when Ed Miliband becomes a sex symbol."
That's very rude, isn't it?
I'll take it. I'll take that as a compliment.
Look, my wife, but when I told Justine about this a couple of nights ago, she sort of looked at me as if to say, "Have you taken leave of your senses? Can this really be true?" Look,
what do the kids make of it?
I haven't yet. I think 4 and 5. I think Millifandom is kind of is not for that age group. Look, I want to just say one thing about Abby, who's set up Millifandom, who's 17. Her point, as I understand it from what she's been saying on social media, is about the voice of young people in our politics. And look, if Millifandom allows me to be the champion of young people in our country, then I want to do that, because I
together 6 Millifandom pictures.
Right.
And we'd like to know which one is the most true Ed Miliband.
I thought one of them was going to be me eating a bacon sandwich. You haven't...
No, because we're not cruel like that. That would be mean, and I'm not like that, as you know.
I think you'll have to describe them for the listeners.
Well, we've got Poldark here.
Yep.
I don't know who that one is. David Beckham.
That's
Hulk Hogan.
That's Mad Men. I think that one is Mad Men.
And we all know who that one is.
That's Mad Men.
I don't watch that.
Right,
so
okay, I don't actually either.
Which one would you like to...
None of them.
No,
come on. I think they're all fantasy. Can I just say?
Anyway, can we give it to you for your loo wall at home? Justine will like to look at that.
Justine will be extremely amused. Thank you very much.
Ed Miliband, we thank you for coming in to talk to us on our election call. Thanks. This is LBC. It's 6 minutes.
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, Ed Miliband has told LBC he stands by his comments that David Cameron bears some responsibility for the number of refugees fleeing to Europe. The Labour leader says the government failed to properly consider what would happen after military action was taken in Libya 4 years ago.
I do sort of slightly think the Conservative Party's